Deep in space, a galaxy explodes. A massive chunk hurtles through the atmosphere and leaves a smoking crater on Earth. The intruders emerge to begin a pattern of destruction. Eagle-eyed G.I. Joe catches a glimpse of his foe for the very first time. G.I. Joe confronts the enemy. The battle is on.
Hello, and welcome to another installment of Plaid Stallion's Toy Ventures. I'm Brian, your host, and our subject this week has the honor of being G.I. Joe's first enemy action figure. Before Cobra Commander or Destro, and just a year before Gor King of the Terrons, G.I. Joe met his first adversary in the form of the Intruders, strongmen from another world. G.I. Joe historically never really had a baddie to fight, although it can be argued that the Soldiers of the World series did include World War II-era foes like Germans or Japanese soldiers, and thus making them enemies. It was never specifically sold that way to youngsters at the time. For the majority of Joe's time out of the military, or as we call it the 1970s, his foes tended to be Mother Nature in the form of sharks, squids, pygmy gorillas, tigers, and giant spiders. Oh, the fun times with that giant spider. The G.I. Joe Adventure Team was a strong-selling toy line in the early 1970s. However, around 1974, it would start to see a sales slump. This slump was due in part to increased competition from toy lines such as Big Jim and the world's greatest superheroes from Mego Corporation. In 1975, the G.I. Joe team took a decisive turn when they created Mike Power, the Atomic Man, an admitted Bionic Man knockoff that sold well for that season. This inspired Hasbro in 1976 to drastically rebrand the Adventure Team into the Super Adventure Team. Joe was given a new feature in Eagle Eyes, which, well, made him a little creepy, to be honest. Mike Power was back, and the newest recruit was Bullet Man, the Human Bullet, a real-life superhero. The only problem for Hasbro was the new trend in action figures, giving them a villain to fight. Gabriel's Lone Ranger line had Butch Cavendish. The Mego World's Greatest Superheroes had the World's Greatest Super Foes, a rogues gallery of DC's finest. So who could challenge the amazing might of the Super Adventure Team? Hasbro's answer was the Intruders, cavemen from outer space. The Intruders' design seemed to be focused on his action feature, which was that he could give members of the Super Adventure Team a big bear hug when you pressed the lever on his back. Due to the design of that crushing feature, Intruder had somewhat limited articulation and was also a few inches shorter than the Joe figures themselves. They really didn't even look like they were part of the same toy line. Hasbro also made two different Intruder characters, the bearded Commander and his clean-shaven lieutenant, the Warrior. So, you had an army builder. There were even two new vehicles introduced that year as well, in the form of Big Trapper and the Capture Copter. Both of these great vehicles were designed with the purpose of capturing the invading army of intruders. According to the comics included with the sets, the intruders came to Earth via a meteor and intended to conquer our planet. They were strong, they were highly intelligent, and they did not own shoes. Hasbro heavily promoted the Super Adventure Team with a series of commercials for each member and monthly comic book ads featuring every character, including the Intruder. Trust me, there was no way you weren't at least aware of these guys as a 5-year-old in 1976. Intruder Commander was also sold in the United Kingdom as part of Palitoy's Action Man line, while Bullet Man, Mike Power, and the vehicles would be subject to something of a redesign in England. The only thing different about the Intruder was his gorgeous box. Palitoy were always awesome at this sort of thing, and the Intruder is no exception. Unfortunately, the Super Adventure team did not help save the day for the G.I. Joe brand. The sun would set on this line in 1976, and by Toy Fair 1977, G.I. Joe would be greatly retooled into the futuristic world of Super Joe. More on that later. While this era of G.I. Joe was mostly reviled by 60s collectors for a good long while, it did eventually gain a strong appreciation and following during the 1990s when kids like me grew up, got jobs and credit cards and stuff. Out of this series, though, the Intruder is still the brunt of a lot of jokes. He is a very unusual and odd character. While writing this episode, I tried to go back to my childhood thoughts about the toy. I absolutely loved the Super Adventure team and had every character, minus the Intruder, and even the Capture Copter. I was completely aware of the Intruders, and I remember having no desire to own one. There were just so many cool toys in 1976. While I had to have Bullet Man, I simply didn't need a space caveman for him to fight. As an adult collector, I've had the Intruder you see before you for over 30 years. I found him at a yard sale back in the 80s. He survived the selling of my original collection in the 1990s because, honestly, I didn't think anyone would buy him. So he's kind of like one of my oldest toy friends now. Did you have the Intruder as a kid? Did you think he was weird? Let me know in the comments below. Or, of course, you can hit me up at Twitter, at Plaid Stallions. We have a thriving Facebook group called Pod Stallions. And, of course, we have the Facebook page, Plaid Stallions. I'll put all the links below, and I'd love to talk Intruder with you. Thanks, as always, for watching. If you're new to this, I hope you'll consider hitting like and subscribe. We do this every week. Until next time, have fun.